A dramatic U-turn by the Lebanese Prime Minister, but 5 years after leading the cry against Syria, why has he changed his mind? Are outside forces at work? And where does it leave the investigation into his father's death? This is Inside Story. Hello there, warm welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. We made a mistake, the stunning change of heart of the Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri, who says he was wrong to accuse Syria over his father's assassination. It was the anger against Syria after the car bombing of 2005 which led to the Cedar Revolution and the end of Syria's military presence in Lebanon. But relations between the two countries have improved of late, and now Hariri has dramatically changed tack. The about turn will come as a relief to international players, including the US and Saudi Arabia, which have been working to bring Syria in from the cold. Rula Amin reports.
When the Lebanese Prime Minister Raik Hariri was killed in a massive car bomb in 2005, many Lebanese were quick to point the finger of blame at the Syrian government. Leading the accusations was his son and the current Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, who led a coalition to push Syrian troops out of Lebanon. 5 years later, Saad al-Hariri now says it was wrong to accuse Syria, saying the allegations were politically motivated and not based on any substantive evidence. Hariri's remarks were published Monday in a leading Saudi newspaper, culminating a shift in policies that has been taking place over the last 2 years. During that time, the Lebanese Prime Minister has visited Damascus several times, met with Syrian President Assad, and used every opportunity to praise Syria and its leadership. The shift has come about as the region's politics moved in favor of Hariri's traditional foes, such as Syria and the Hezbollah group. Hezbollah had emerged strong after the 2006 war with Israel, and Syria was brought out of political isolation, thanks in part to overtures from the new Obama administration.
It's a big rhetorical shift, but in terms of policy, it's a small movement, but a dramatic one that is the culmination of changes that have been going on for about the last year and a half. Gradually, Syria re-establishing its normal ties and influence in Lebanon.
Earlier this year, President Assad and King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia visited Lebanon to calm tensions over reports that the International Tribunal investigating the Raik Hariri assassination was likely to indict members of Hezbollah over the killing. Hezbollah has denied the accusations, with its leader Hassan Nasrallah saying the tribunal is politicized and aims to undermine and weaken his group to serve US and Israeli interests in the region. Nasrallah wants the Lebanese government, and especially Hariri, to discredit the tribunal and dismiss any findings of the investigation. In the interview, Hariri admits that some people have misled the international investigators looking into the assassination of his father. An acknowledgement Hezbollah has been demanding, now coming from the son of the assassinated Prime Minister. Surely Hezbollah will use it to further discredit the international investigation and any indictment the International Tribunal will issue. Rula Amin, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Well, let me introduce you to today's guests. In Beirut, we have political writer and analyst Saleh Mashnouk. In Damascus, George Jabour, the former advisor to the predecessor of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And in Amman, Lamis Andoni, a Middle East analyst who's written extensively on the politics surrounding the tribunal on Lebanon. Good to have you all with us. Thanks very much indeed. Let's start with the view in Syria. George, the Syrians must be extremely happy that Saad Hariri has had this change of heart.
Well, it was expected. The minute Prime Minister Hariri visited Damascus and met President Bashar al-Assad, this, to many Syrians, meant that Hariri does not believe the accusations that were leveled against Syria. Otherwise, he would not have come here. So I suppose that while we are happy with what was said by Hariri to al-Sharq al-Awsat, yet this was expected, this was in line with the developments that we have witnessed for the last year.
But George, he certainly did believe those accusations in 2005 when his father was killed. So the question is, what has made him change his mind?
Facts. When you accuse without foundation, when you discover that your accusations were unfounded, when you discover that.
But we don't
there
know
were
that there's
people
any
who
the
misled
accusations have
the
been unfounded, because we
investigation.
haven't actually heard any decisions from these special tribunals. So how do you know that those facts were unfounded?
When he accused Syria, there were also no proofs that the accusations were right. So he changed his mind. He sort of ascertained whatever he can ascertain from the facts of the situation, and then he changed his mind. This is very logical.
Saleh, is it logical? What's the view in Beirut? Why did Hariri change his rhetoric like this?
I understand that he would say so, but I think it's slightly naive to believe that, well, he believed something then and he doesn't anymore. I think the fact of the matter is, one, this is undoubtedly the dark side of Lebanese and regional politics. Two, what has happened is part of two larger happenings in the region over the past year. The first is the reconciliation process between the Lebanese Prime Minister and the Syrian leadership under the auspices of Saudi Arabia, and more clearly recently under the guidelines of Saudi policy. The second more important thing to mention here is that the political accusation was made within a context of political assassination. At some point in time, two events happened. The first, political assassination stopped. There was no political assassination in the past at least couple of years, if I recall. The second is that the International Tribunal for Lebanon has been set up and is currently functional. So it would be somewhat absurd to continue with the political accusation, regardless of whether one believes in it or not, after the judicial setup has taken place. Now, it's all in the hands of the International Tribunal for Lebanon, and the International Tribunal has to decide which is accused and which is not. This is not to say that I agree with what
but this
Prime
is a
Minister
tribunal
Hariri,
which in itself has been accused of being politicised.
Well, this is an opinion, but it's an opinion clearly based on no facts whatsoever, except the fact that some political parties feel that they will be accused in one way or the other, and are attempting to preempt that accusation with an attack to discredit the International Tribunal. The International Tribunal has not done one thing of value which can allow anyone to accuse it of being politicized. The only thing that at some point in time was being used to accuse the tribunal of being politicized is the issue of the generals that were imprisoned in Lebanon for a long period of time and were being questioned. These were released under the auspice of the International Tribunal for Lebanon. Since then, every accusation to the International Tribunal has been based on press reports whose credibility is at least to be questioned. So there's nothing there. It's simply a political accusation from a party that seems to think that it may be involved in one way or the other in the assassination of Prime Minister Hariri.
OK, well, there's no doubt that relations between Lebanon and Syria have been improving of late. The Lebanese Prime Minister says he wants to open a new page in ties with Damascus. He said a man should be pragmatic to build ties on solid grounds, and he has to reevaluate the past years to avoid repeating past mistakes. Thus, we did a reevaluation of mistakes from our part towards Syria. Lamis, Saleh mentions the role of Saudi Arabia there. Saad Hariri talks about re-evaluation. What role is Saudi Arabia playing in this re-evaluation of the stance towards Syria?
No, I think Saudi Arabia was the major force in getting Hariri to visit Damascus and reconcile with the man he had accused of killing his father. Saudi Arabia has re-emerged together with Syria as the stabilizers of Lebanon and as the sponsors of stability in Lebanon. So if it weren't for Saudi Arabia, it would have been very difficult to convince Hariri personally, especially that we have to remember that it was Saudi backing and that got Hariri or made Hariri into a very important or gave the chance to Hariri to become a very important politician in Lebanon. And the Hariri-Saudi Arabia relationship goes a long way.
Raik Hariri was actually a dual Saudi-Lebanese citizen,
and
wasn't he?
It was the Saudis who sort of opened the Damascus gate, because as Damascus had the strongest influence back then in Lebanon, to Hariri's career or future as a major political leader in Lebanon. But I want to emphasize that it was the shift in Obama, the Obama shift, that made it possible for, or prompted Hariri and the others to change their position, because Obama shifted the American policy from that of isolation of Syria to that of engagement of Syria. And that really affected the whole course of the March 14th alliance led by Hariri and made them reevaluate their position.
Well, let's just concentrate on Saudi Arabia for the moment. Are you saying that Saudi Arabia was responsible for Hariri's shift in its stance towards Syria, and does that mean that Saudi wants Syria to have more of an influence in Lebanon?
No, Saudi Arabia played a major part. It wasn't solely responsible. But the winds have changed, and Saudi Arabia advised Hariri and prompted him to visit Damascus. Secondly, Saudi Arabia is interested in stability in Lebanon and has regained its role in Lebanon, which it had lost for a while, and now it had regained it through Hariri.
George, do you agree with that assessment? Saudi Arabia wants Syria to play more of a role in Lebanon for stability?
Well, this is generally understood, but then I would take issue with the idea that all our ideas come from the outside, come from Obama, come from Washington, come from the north, come from the west. Any Lebanese knows for sure, and from the daily experience, that Lebanon cannot dispense with Syria, that Lebanon has to have good relations with Syria. No order on that has to come from Obama. Syria was not isolated. Syria had its stand on crucial Middle Eastern issues, and this stand sort of favored Syria to the many Arabs, and that, of course, did not favor Syria to many of those who more or less are more sympathetic to Israel. I would like to say that Prime Minister Hariri was courageous, was rational, was logical. His declaration certainly should be viewed in the light of Lebanese interests, in the light of facts that he has discovered after 5 years, perhaps not 5 years, but perhaps 4 years or 3 years, because his position started to shift something like 1 year ago, more than 1 year ago. I have to say regarding the International Tribunal, and I was a judge myself, that it is difficult to investigate a crime from a distance when you don't know the circumstances. I would like to say that the International Court preempted itself when it had ordered the imprisonment of 4 senior generals, and then after 4 years thought that there was no reason to imprison them. This means that they were led by witnesses that misled the International Tribunal. This is crucial. One has to start with the witnesses to investigate what prompted them to mislead, and then to proceed in order to discover the facts.
Well, George, let me bring up the point of view of the UN prosecutor Daniel Bellemare, who has flatly rejected accusations that the investigation was politicised. He says we operate in a political context, but the decision that will be made is not a political decision, and I will only file the indictment when I'm satisfied that there is enough evidence. You're suggesting the UN tribunal or the UN-backed tribunal is
from his part.
politicised.
That was a good statement on his part, but then it was expected. As a matter of fact, any international tribunal works into a international political context. As a matter of fact, I was in the United States teaching political science when the report of Justice Earl Warren was published on the assassination of Kennedy. Earl Warren was by then the respected Chief Justice of the United States, the President of the United States Supreme Court. 10,000 pages. And then when the public opinion was sounded, they discovered that only 10% believed that Earl Warren did not be subjected to political considerations. This is a fact. High justice is certainly related to high politics.
Salah, what do you say to the speculation that the special tribunal may well be indicting Hezbollah officers, maybe in a few days' time?
In terms of a few days' time, I think Bellemare was very clear in his interview. He specifically said that he needed more time to gather evidence, etc., etc. So it seems to me like it's going to be next year's show, not this year.
Okay, but what happens if at the end of the day Hezbollah officials are indicted over this?
Okay, listen, here's this thing. In terms of Hezbollah, there hasn't been any political accusation to Hezbollah except in some Western newspapers and some Israeli officials. Everybody else is saying to Hezbollah, let's wait and see what the tribunal has to say. Balmat has been very clear about circumstantial evidence. He says that he will not put forward evidence to the tribunal unless they are irrefutable evidence. And in that case, I think Hezbollah and everybody else should just wait and see. If somebody from Hezbollah turns out to be implicated in that process, it has to be proven through the tribunal. If it isn't proven, it has no value whatsoever.
But will Saad Hariri accept such a decision? Because that is going to be deeply damaging to the fragile political situation in Lebanon.
Listen, absolutely. Hariri's assassination was very damaging to the political stability, and so were all of the other assassinations. The detriment to political stability is the assassinations and not the tribunal's decision. If the tribunal has very clear evidence indicting Hezbollah, and I stress on the word if they do, then Saad al-Hariri has no option but to accept the indictment of the tribunal, whatever this may be. It is the responsibility of the Lebanese political forces, especially the forces that are armed with massive military force, and I mean Hezbollah, to be able to conduct itself properly and in the interest of stability in Lebanon. It is unfair to the Lebanese people and to those that died fighting for Lebanon to give the Lebanese an ultimatum between stability and justice. We can only achieve real justice through stability and vice versa. And I think it's unreasonable to perceive any of these assassinations as signs either of justice or stability. So justice and stability will be served on the long term in the right way through the tribunal, the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. And everybody has to wait and see what the tribunal has to say. And we're all looking forward to see what kind of evidence they will put forward.
And the problem is, of course, that there are so many outside forces with vested interest in the outcome. France, the US, Lamisa, what do you think the decision of the Special Tribunal will have in Lebanon? I mean, it seems that it can't make, whatever decision it makes, is going to lead to trouble.
Exactly, and I agree with you, Shuli. An indictment of Hezbollah means it will lead to the destabilization of Lebanon, because Hezbollah will not accept that. And because Hezbollah believes that the indictment will be used to achieve other political objectives in Lebanon, mainly or namely the disarming of Hezbollah. So this is why Saudi Arabia has been looking for a way out, whether it is for Saad al-Hariri not to accept the indictment, and that will be difficult, but this is one of the scenarios that were being discussed, in order not to, if the indictment accuses Hezbollah, or to find a way to make sure that there'll be a political deal between Hezbollah and the government that will not lead to an internal explosion. So the indictment will have, no matter what it is, will have deep repercussions on the situation in Lebanon, and especially that Israel has a vested interest in seeing an indictment of Hezbollah and will use it to step up its rhetoric and its pressure on Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah.
And what do you think of this, the surmise that Saudi is willing to have more Syrian involvement in Lebanon, will turn a blind eye to more Syrian involvement in Lebanon if it means a more regional a more stable region?
It's already, well, we know as a fact now that Syria's influence is back in Lebanon. And you see it, that has been translated in Hariri's statements and in other statements from the March 14th coalition. So it's not only Syria, there's a tacit approval by the US as well.
Do you agree with that, George?
Well, it is the Lebanese desire to live and prosper that makes them closer to Syria. It is very simple.
I can see Salah laughing in Beirut. Sally, George said earlier that Lebanon cannot dispense with Syria. What do you say to that?
I perfectly agree with George. I just think he put things out in a rather funny manner, that the Lebanese desire to be prosperous means that they be close to Syria. The Lebanese have a vested interest in close, bilateral, friendly, balanced and institutional relations with Syria. And this is what the current government has tried to do over the past year. I think George and I can agree that we haven't seen any concrete results for the Syrian-Lebanese reconciliation process till now. The border has not been demarcated, the Lebanese prisoners in Syria have not been released, the Palestinian camps in Lebanon under Syrian auspices and patronage has not been dismantled, etc., etc., and the list goes on. We want friendly relations with Syria. It cannot occur to any Lebanese with his normal mind that an Arab country neighboring to Lebanon, actually the only Arab country neighboring to Lebanon, should have tense relations with Lebanon. But historically, it has not been Lebanon's turn to make sure that the Syrian affairs were not intervened in, that Syrian officials were not assassinated, that Syria's stability was not put under attack. I think it's the Syrian responsibility to make sure that Syrian-Lebanese relations are as they should be, prosperous economic relations, no political interference in Syria.
Do you think there will be bilateral talks? I mean, Hariri's comments seem to have opened up the way towards having some serious negotiations, for example.
I agree. And I think what we've seen over the past year is a trial period. It's a trial period marked by a lot of positive signs, but I still have to say that there is nothing concrete in terms of the real problems that have marked Lebanese-Syrian relations over the past 30 or 40 years. We want perfect relationships with Syria, but we want them based on institutionalism, on balance, and on mutual respect. And one last thing in terms of what Saudi Arabia wants for Syria and Lebanon. Saudi Arabia has a vested interest in stability in Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia believes that Syria can play a positive role in ensuring the stability of Lebanon. But it is up to the Lebanese to make sure that the positive Syrian role in Lebanon or the positive Syrian relationship with Lebanon does not translate into sort of a covered, newly formed image of what we have seen in the 1990s of complete Syrian dominance over Lebanese affairs, because such a dominance can only end the way it has ended with the withdrawal of Syrian troops in 2005. And we don't want to see domination, and we don't want to see this kind of withdrawal anymore.
Last quick word to Lamis. With the US making overtures to Syria and talking about putting an ambassador, US ambassador in Syria, do you see Syria's position in the Arab world changing dramatically?
No, not really. I mean, that will, of course, there's an end to the isolation of Syria or attempts to isolate Syria. But I want to go back to Lebanon, please. Hariri's statement also reflected his acknowledgement that the initial process was flawed because he said that the witnesses were misled. But I want to say something here, that the Hariri statement could be another way of now paving the ground for the indictment of Hezbollah, saying that the process initially was flawed, but now we are raising the bar for he raised the bar for the investigation and for the STL, and it could be a way for him to proceed forward and pave the way for the indictment of Hezbollah. So we are not finished here.
I'm so sorry, we have to leave it there, but we do wait to see what results the special tribunal comes up with. Let me thank my guests for today, Saleh Mashnouk, George Jabour and Lamis Andoni. And thank you for watching. If you have any comments about today's programme, please do email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Until next time, from me, Shuli Ghosh. Bye-bye for now.